Harley-Davidson has built some of the greatest and the worst motorcycles of all time. For every legend that defined American freedom, there's been a failure that nearly wrecked the brand's reputation. Some became icons, others disappeared in embarrassment. This isn't nostalgia, it's the raw truth. The 7 worst and 5 best Harley-Davidsons ever made, side by side. Let's start with one the company would rather everyone forgot. At number 7 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson Street 500, the beginner bike that nobody wanted. When Harley launched the Street 500 in 2014, it was supposed to be their ticket to a younger generation. Affordable, urban-friendly, and lightweight. It looked great on paper. But what rolled out of the factory became a mechanic's nightmare and a marketer's headache. The Street 500 used a 494 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled Revolution X engine, which was brand new for Harley. Unfortunately, new didn't mean better. Mechanics quickly discovered problems: inconsistent fueling, rough idle, poor heat management, and a gearbox that felt clunky even by Harley standards. Riders complained of stalling, vibration at mid-speed, and a general lack of refinement. The build quality didn't help either. Harley outsourced production to factories in India and Thailand to keep costs low, and early models suffered from weak welds, cheap plastics, and corrosion-prone parts. Even the paint quality was hit or miss. For a company known for premium craftsmanship, the Street 500 felt like a downgrade in every sense. Performance-wise, it also failed to inspire. Despite weighing less than most Harleys, it struggled to make an impact. The engine produced just 34 horsepower, barely enough for highway riding, and the suspension felt overwhelmed on rough pavement. Riders looking for Harley's soul found something closer to commuter blandness. Dealers tried to push it as a starter Harley, but it backfired. New riders found better options from Honda and Yamaha at the same price, while traditional Harley fans saw it as an insult to the brand's image. By 2020, the Street 500 quietly disappeared from most markets. It didn't go out in flames. It just faded away, unloved and unsold. And if the Street 500 was a flop born from good intentions, the next model was a disaster Harley should have seen coming from miles away. At number 6 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson V-Rod, the muscle bike that divided an entire fan base. When Harley rolled out the V-Rod in 2001, it looked like nothing the company had ever made. Low-slung frame, futuristic styling, and a Porsche-engineered liquid-cooled engine. Harley wanted to prove it could compete with modern performance machines. But instead of creating a revolution, the V-Rod created confusion. The 1130 cubic centimeter Revolution engine was undeniably powerful, producing around 115 horsepower, a huge leap for Harley at the time. It revved high, pulled strong, and sounded like a mix between a sport bike and a muscle car. On paper, it was a triumph of engineering. But when that engine met Harley's traditional crowd, things got awkward. Longtime Harley riders didn't like it. They said it didn't feel like a Harley. No signature rumble, no low-end grunt, and none of the familiar vibration that made their old bikes come alive. The V-Rod was too smooth, too sleek, too un-Harley. Meanwhile, younger riders, the ones Harley built it for, still preferred sport bikes from Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki, which were faster, lighter, and cheaper. Then came the practicality issues. The fuel tank wasn't where you thought it was. It sat under the seat. The actual gas cap on the tank was fake. The bike's ergonomics were brutal on long rides, and the forward controls made it awkward for shorter riders. Even experienced owners complained about the harsh suspension and cramped design. It wasn't unreliable, but maintenance costs were high. Many Harley shops weren't used to servicing liquid-cooled engines, and parts weren't cheap. It became a bike that mechanics didn't hate, but didn't love working on either. The V-Rod survived for 16 years, which sounds impressive until you realize sales dropped hard after the initial buzz faded. Harley eventually pulled the plug in 2017, citing poor global demand. And if the V-Rod split the Harley family in two, the next one united them in disappointment. A bike that tried to mix adventure with tradition and failed both ways. At number 5 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson Pan America 1250, Harley's bold adventure gone sideways. When Harley launched the Pan America 1250 in 2021, it shocked everyone. This wasn't another chrome-heavy cruiser. It was a full-blown adventure bike. The company finally decided to chase BMW's GS crowd with something lighter, smarter, and more global. At first, it worked. The reviews were solid, the hype was real, and for a moment, Harley seemed unstoppable. But fast forward to 2025, and the story isn't nearly as bright. The Pan America 1250 came equipped with the new Revolution Max engine, pumping out 150 horsepower and paired with modern tech, adaptive ride height, cornering ABS, traction control, and a TFT display. On paper, it was everything adventure riders wanted, but the real world revealed a different side. The bike's biggest problem was reliability. Owners started reporting software glitches, suspension errors, and engine heat issues. The fancy adaptive suspension, one of its selling points, turned out to be a maintenance headache. Several riders complained about it locking up or failing mid-ride, leading to costly dealer visits. The TFT screen, meant to showcase Harley's modern edge, frequently froze or lost connection with the app, a small but irritating flaw for tech-heavy touring. Mechanics also pointed out that parts were expensive and hard to source. Unlike Harley's cruisers, which have decades of shared components, the Pan America had unique everything, meaning if something broke, you'd wait weeks for replacements. But the real killer wasn't technical. It was cultural. Harley's loyal base didn't buy it, and the adventure community didn't fully trust it. It sat awkwardly between markets, too expensive for mid-range ADV riders, and too unfamiliar for traditional Harley fans. At around $19,999, most buyers ended up walking to BMW or Honda showrooms instead. And if the Pan America stumbled because Harley aimed too high, the next one fell flat for the opposite reason, a bike that aimed small and hit even smaller. At number 4 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson Street Rod, a failed attempt to fix a failure. When the Street 500 and Street 750 tanked, Harley wasn't ready to give up on the idea of a smaller urban motorcycle. So in 2017, they introduced the Street Rod, marketed as a sportier, more refined version, a street done right. Unfortunately, it turned out to be just another disappointment, one that mechanics still joke about in Harley shops today. The Street Rod used the same 749 cubic centimeters Revolution X engine as the Street 750, but was tuned for more power, about 70 horsepower instead of 53. Harley gave it new suspension, dual front discs, and a more aggressive riding position. On paper, this was supposed to be the model that finally won back young city riders. But in reality, the execution missed the mark completely. The riding posture was awkward. High foot pegs and a low handlebar meant even average height riders felt cramped after just 20 minutes. The suspension was stiff, the steering was heavy at low speeds, and the heat management was, frankly, awful. Mechanics quickly learned to warn new buyers about the heat coming off the rear cylinder in summer traffic. One shop in Texas described it as riding with a space heater under your leg. Then there was the price. At around $8,700, it was too expensive for beginners, but not exciting enough for experienced riders. Combine that with the fact that Harley's own Iron 883 and used Sportsters were available for similar money, and you can see why the Street Rod never found its place. Dealers struggled from the start. Even heavy promotions and zero-interest financing barely moved inventory. Mechanics frequently saw brand new street rods coming back with issues: rough idle, poor throttle response, and electrical gremlins, the kind of small annoyances that ruin a new rider's first experience. By 2021, Harley quietly discontinued the street rod without much of a send-off. There was no farewell edition, no final update, just a quiet exit from showrooms. And if the street rod struggled because because Harley couldn't define what it wanted to be, the next one suffered because Harley refused to let go of what it used to be. At number 3 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson Sport Glide, the cruiser that couldn't pick a side. When Harley introduced the Sport Glide in 2018, it sounded like a brilliant idea. Take the comfort of a touring bike, mix it with the lighter feel of a cruiser, and you'd have the perfect all-around Harley. At least, that's what the marketing promised. But as the years went by, the Sport Glide proved that trying to please everyone can leave you pleasing no one. Powered by the Milwaukee 8 107 engine, the Sport Glide packed 1,745 cubic centimeters of torque-rich muscle, producing about 82 horsepower and 107 pound-feet of torque. It came with mini fairings, removable saddlebags, and a relaxed riding stance that, in theory, made it a great do-it-all Harley. Riders could strip it down for casual rides or load it up for touring weekends. Sounds ideal, right? But in practice, the bike felt confused. It wasn't light enough to feel nimble, nor heavy enough to feel planted like a full dresser. The front mini fairing barely deflected wind, and the stock seat comfort was underwhelming for long-distance rides. Riders complained that the detachable bags rattled over bumps and didn't hold much compared to Harley's full touring luggage. Mechanics didn't hate it, but they didn't love it either. Maintenance was straightforward, but replacement parts, especially for the detachable setup, were expensive and hard to find. The small production numbers didn't help, leaving some dealers without the parts customers needed for basic repairs. The biggest problem, though, was Harley's own lineup. The Sport Glide sat awkwardly between the Lowrider S and the Road King, two bikes that did its job better at either end of the spectrum. The Lowrider S gave you more attitude and performance, while the Road King gave you real touring comfort. The Sport Glide was just fine, and fine doesn't sell motorcycles. By 2025, resale values have plummeted. Dealers are discounting used models by several $1,000s just to clear space, and buyers often skip it altogether in favor of something more defined. Even loyal Harley fans call it one of the brand's forgotten children. It's not unreliable, it's not ugly, and it's not slow. It's just forgettable. If the Sport Glide was Harley's confused middle child, the next bike was their overachieving problem child. Too fast, too expensive, and too niche for its own good. At number 2 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson V-Rod Muscle, the misunderstood powerhouse that aged faster than milk. When Harley unveiled the V-Rod Muscle, it was supposed to be the company's bold step into the future, a performance cruiser that would shake off Harley's old man bike image. Developed in partnership with Porsche, it had everything a modern rider could want on paper: a 1,247 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled Revolution engine, 122 horsepower, and styling that looked like it had been carved out of steel. For a while, people thought Harley had cracked the code, but it didn't take long for the problems to show up. First off, the V-Rod Muscle never felt like a Harley. The liquid-cooled engine didn't rumble, it screamed. The frame was thick and muscular, but the soul? Missing. Traditional Harley fans found it too smooth, too refined, and too detached from the raw feel that made them love the brand in the first place. Then came the ergonomics. With forward controls and a massive 240mm rear tire, it looked fierce, but it rode like a brick. Short riders couldn't handle the reach to the bars, and taller riders complained about knee pain on long rides. The weight, nearly 673 pounds wet, didn't help either. You needed serious muscle to move the muscle. Mechanics had mixed feelings about it. The engine was strong and well-engineered, but the rest of the bike was a headache to service. Simple maintenance tasks required removing body panels or disassembling parts of the exhaust. Replacement components were costly, and now, in 2025, they're becoming harder to find as Harley phased out the line years ago. The other issue was audience confusion. The V-Rod Muscle was too sporty for cruiser fans, but too heavy for sport riders. It lived in a no-man's land where nobody was entirely sure what to do with it. And while it looked like a monster on the showroom floor, it lacked comfort and practicality on real roads. Resale value tells the full story. Once a $17,000 bike, used models now struggle to sell for even $8,000, depending on mileage. Collectors aren't interested, and younger riders don't see the appeal. What was once a statement of power has become a reminder that Harley's experiments with modernity sometimes miss the mark. And if the V-Rod muscle failed because Harley went too far into the future, the next bike on the worst list failed for the exact opposite reason. It refused to leave the past. At number 1 on the worst list, the Harley-Davidson Electra Glide Standard, the legend that forgot to evolve. Now, this might sting a little for longtime Harley fans. The Electra Glide name carries serious weight. It's one of Harley-Davidson's most iconic touring lines, a symbol of American open-road freedom. But the Electra Glide Standard, especially in its modern form, shows what happens when nostalgia goes unchecked and innovation gets left behind. When Harley brought back the Electra Glide Standard in 2019, the pitch was simple. A no-frills, stripped-down touring bike for purists. No touchscreen, no boombox infotainment system, no flashy chrome, just the basics. It came with the Milwaukee 8 107 engine, producing 111 pound-feet of torque, and it sold for around $19,000, thousands cheaper than the Ultra Limited or Road Glide. At first, people loved the idea. Mechanics praised its simplicity, and riders said it felt honest. But as the years rolled by, that simplicity started to look less like minimalism and more like neglect. In 2025, the Electra Glide Standard feels outdated next to everything else in its class. Riders expect cruise control, Bluetooth, or at least a modern dash, but the Glide still clings to analog gauges and a bare front fairing. The suspension feels harsh compared to competitors like the Indian Super Chief Limited or BMW R18 Bagger, both of which deliver the same classic style with better comfort and refinement. Mechanics also point out one major issue. Harley's cost-cutting on the Standard meant cheaper components. The stock seat is firm, the suspension lacks adjustability, and long rides can turn punishing fast. For a bike meant to cover thousands of miles, that's a major miss. And while the 107 engine is solid, it lacks the effortless torque and smoothness of the newer 117 and 121 variants. The resale market reflects that disappointment. The Electra Glide Standard has some of the worst depreciation among Harley's touring lineup. Used models that once sold near $18,000 now sit around $11,000 to $12,000, often with low mileage. Even dealers struggle to move them because most touring buyers would rather pay more for the features they actually want. What really hurts the Electra Glide Standard is that Harley didn't give it an identity beyond cheap touring. It's too bare bones for touring enthusiasts and too bulky for casual riders. Instead of being the spiritual return to Harley's roots, it feels like a half-hearted middle ground, a big bike missing the big experience. Mechanics say the engine will probably last forever, but that doesn't save the ride from being, well, boring. As one veteran Harley tech put it, it's reliable, but it's got all the soul of a rental bike. Now that we've gone through Harley's worst mistakes, it's time to switch gears, because the next 7 bikes on this list show the other side of the story. The Harleys that not only survived the years, but aged like fine steel. These are the machines that mechanics respect, riders cherish, and collectors won't let go of. At number 5 on the best list, the Harley-Davidson Dyna Super Glide, the working man's Harley that refuses to die. If you ask any seasoned mechanic which Harley they'd trust to cross the country without a single hiccup, the Dyna Super Glide will come up fast. This bike is the textbook example of Harley reliability. Simple, strong, and built before the brand went overboard with tech and electronics. Introduced back in the 1970s and lasting until 2017, the Super Glide has earned its reputation the old-fashioned way by surviving decades of abuse from riders who barely changed the oil on time. Its heart is the twin-cam engine, a workhorse that's easy to maintain, full of torque, and surprisingly forgiving. Mechanics love it because everything's accessible. You can practically rebuild half the bike with basic tools and a service manual. Riders love it for another reason. It feels alive. The Dyna platform gave Harley that perfect mix of comfort and grit. It's got that signature shake at idle, the deep rumble through the pipes, and a riding stance that just fits whether you're cruising back roads or hitting the freeway. Unlike newer Harleys that tried too hard to look futuristic, the Super Glide kept its roots. Steel tank, open stance, and that unmistakable silhouette. What's even better is how it's aged. Used Dynas from the late 2000s and early 2010s are still fetching strong prices. A clean 2016 2014 Super Glide that cost about $13,000 new can still sell for over $10,000 today. That's unheard of depreciation control for a cruiser. It's also one of the few Harleys that holds up under customization. Clubs, solo riders, and touring veterans all find a way to make it their own, and it keeps going no matter what you throw at it. Mechanics joke that the Dyna Super Glide is the cockroach of Harleys. You can't kill it even if you tried, and honestly, they're right. With minimal electronics, bulletproof parts, and an engine designed to run hot and hard, it's no wonder it's still on the road long after newer models have vanished from showrooms. And if the Super Glide shows what dependable simplicity looks like, the next bike proves that luxury and longevity can actually go hand in hand, even in Harley's world. At number 4, the Harley-Davidson Road King, the touring classic that outlasts everything else on the highway. There are touring bikes, and then there's the Road King, the undisputed heavyweight that's been carrying riders across continents since 1994. While trends come and go, this Harley just keeps rolling, proving that comfort, class, and toughness don't need constant reinvention. The secret behind the Road King's staying power is its balance. It's big, yes, tipping the scales around 820 pounds, but it rides smoother than you'd expect thanks to Harley's touring chassis and that legendary Milwaukee 8 engine. Whether it's the 107, 114, or 117 cubic inch variant, the power delivery is buttery and predictable, perfect for highway cruising. Mechanics often call it the bulletproof bagger because it handles long-distance stress better than almost anything in Harley's lineup. Unlike other touring bikes that drown you in screens and switches, the Road King keeps things refreshingly analog. Big, easy-to-read gauges, a windshield that pops off in seconds, and bags that swallow a weekend's worth of gear. Everything about it is built for real-world use. Owners rack up 100,000+ miles regularly, and many of these bikes still run like new with routine service. But here's what really sets it apart: comfort and confidence.